Go for it.
Thanks, Tom, for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to always nice to be on your show. So I did write a piece on Common Dreams about the case that's before the Supreme Court right now, which they may be deciding any time this month, where Charles Koch's team is seeking to have the Supreme Court declare that disclosing donors to regulatory agencies from these nonprofit operations is unconstitutional, that it chills what they call speech, which is spending of money on big groups like the Koch political operation if regulatory bodies know about it. And so that case is coming up, and I wrote a piece about what I saw and understood later about the Koch funding and Koch alliance for the ACLU. And so I was, I'm disappointed that the ACLU has weighed in on the side of the Koch brothers in this case. And I'm concerned that this new packed court is going to use its newly expanded majority to try to preemptively strike a blow against H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and S1, which are, really right now the only ways in which we can try to get some disclosure of how these big billionaires are spending their money to distort our elections.
This would be a doubling down on both Citizens United and arguably McCutcheon, and certainly on Buckley and Bellotti on those decisions in 76 and 78, and then the 2010 Citizens United, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yep.
So how badly corrupted, first of all, have you or anybody considered the possibility that Congress could or should not, for that matter, use the power given to them in Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which says that Congress may create exceptions to what the Supreme Court may rule on? In other words, adding what's called court stripping language to H.R. 1 that says the Supreme Court may not rule on the constitutionality of this.
Well, it's always a joy to talk with you because you're so knowledgeable, Tom, about the case history and also currently the land in terms of what's happening in Congress. And, I think that, we are in a very precarious position with this Supreme Court. We have a court that has been packed in a way that's virtually unprecedented in U.S. history. In the last 50 years, by the way, there have been, basically only 4 Democratic appointees to that Supreme Court and, 16 appointees from Republican presidents. And so we have a very out of balance court. We have a court that has been handpicked by Leonard Leo, who's one of the architects of what he described as a revival of what he calls the structural constitution. And he has told his funders that America hasn't seen the kind of revolution through the courts in 100 years since before the New Deal, that this court is poised to unfurl. And we've already seen 3 major pillars of that agenda even before now. One was the Citizens United decision, as you point out, which really unleashed this massive dark money that Koch has exploited. Charles Koch, one of the richest men in the world. We saw that in the Voting Rights Act case, where they basically took away the power of Congress, in essence, and the Justice Department to pre-clear some of these changes in voting. And now we're seeing this rampant effort to make it so much harder for Americans to vote. And then the third part is the case that Rucho case, where the Supreme Court said it wasn't going to get involved in this extreme partisan map drawing, where we have states like Wisconsin and North Carolina, where you have a majority of Democratic votes, but a legislative majority and congressional delegations that are dominated by Republicans because the maps are so distorted. And so I think Congress should look at all options available for fixing this situation, for resetting the table. That this Supreme Court and some of these extreme judicial appointments that Trump made are prepared to basically crush our ability as a democracy to really function, in my view, to really put their thumb on the scale of justice and also take away the ability of Congress to delegate powers to the agencies, administrative agencies, to regulate corporations. So we have 30 years of this unless a 30-year majority from this 6-3 court unless we're able to make substantial reforms to protect our democracy.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I wrote a book about this, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. And when I was doing the research for that, I found this 29-page memo that John Roberts produced when he was working for Ronald Reagan in the Reagan Justice Department. And Reagan had tasked him with the job of how do we overturn Brown v. Board and Roe v. Wade without changing the court, because we can't change the court. And Roberts did a deep dive into this all the way back to the founding of the Republic. And what he came up with, what his suggestion to Reagan was pass a law that says that Article 3, Section 2 says Congress can regulate the court. Typically that has meant their budget and the number of members, and also can create exceptions to what the court may rule on. And so simply pass a law overturning Brown and add to that law language that says the court may not rule on this. Pass a law overturning Roe v. Wade and include language saying that the court can't rule on this. Reagan didn't do it. He didn't think he had the political capital to pull it off. It's right there, and it's in John Roberts' hand, for God's sake. I mean, it's just, I reprinted a big chunk of it in my book.
Yeah.
So
your book is brilliant, Tom, really. It's an extraordinary, description of sort of how we got into this mess and some of the key players. And I myself spent a lot of time trying to keep John Roberts off the court, because I felt that he was, someone who definitely had an agenda to dramatically change our rights.
Oh, yeah.
It turns out that he's not as extreme as some of the people who came after him, which is also very worrisome. And we're really headed to a collision course, because we have a rising electorate of progressive youth who want to make sure that we can mitigate climate change, and we can have policies that, make sure that our government works well for the people and isn't just serving these corporations that are paying nothing in taxes and, spending a lot of money on lobbying, and their CEOs are spending a lot of money, some of them, on these front groups like some of the Koch operations. And we have a court that is poised to basically be in place until these young people retire, if they're able to retire, unless we make some substantial changes to the way this court operates. That could include changes in jurisdiction. It could include expanding the court. As you know, there's no reason why it's 9 justices. It could be 15. I think it should be 15. I think there should be other appellate courts that can deal with the fact that this Supreme Court only takes 90 cases out of 9,000 per year. And so it's handpicking which cases it wants to change our society on. And these justices that have been appointed by Trump are so arrogant and I think so unfit that they're more than willing to substitute their personal judgment, their personal political agenda for longstanding landmark cases and precedents like Brown, like Roe. And, there's obviously an indication that right now this court has taken that Mississippi case, and they may well overturn Roe versus Wade, quote, send it back to the states in a way that really undermines women's reproductive freedoms.